Welcome to Past Chronicles. In today's video, we're sailing into one of the darker chapters of ancient Roman history, uncovering the mystery and terror of the empire's notorious death ships. The Roman Empire's power wasn't just confined to land. Its massive fleet ruled the Mediterranean, controlling vital trade routes and solidifying Roman dominance over the seas. But lurking behind this incredible naval might were whispers of terrifying vessels built for a single, sinister purpose: destruction. These ships, known ominously as death ships, were feared by everyone, from Rome's fiercest enemies to its own citizens. They weren't just tools of war, they were floating symbols of death, terror, and absolute power. What exactly made these ships so unique? And why did they inspire such dread? Let's dive in. Roman death ships were specifically designed for the deadliest of missions. This could mean anything from carrying out mass executions and secret assassinations to annihilating entire enemy fleets. To achieve this, they were often armed with the most advanced weaponry of the era, and their crews were composed of some of the most hardened and brutal soldiers in the entire Roman army. For me, the name alone, death ship, paints a chilling picture. You can immediately tell these weren't vessels for trade or exploration. They were floating death machines, meticulously engineered to strike fear into the hearts of all who saw them. Their purpose wasn't just to win battles, but to terrify their opponents into submission before a single sword was even drawn. One of the most infamous uses for these ships was for executions. Roman emperors, particularly the more tyrannical ones, would use these vessels to conduct mass executions of prisoners of war, political rivals, and anyone deemed an enemy of the state. These grim events were often carried out in total secrecy, far out at sea. The bodies of the victims were simply cast into the waves, disappearing forever without a trace, leaving no graves to be mourned and no evidence of the crime. The design of the death ships was meant to be as efficient as it was terrifying. Their dark, imposing structures were deliberately built to intimidate. Imagine being a captured sailor or a condemned prisoner, seeing one of these dark hulks appearing on the horizon. The psychological effect would have been overwhelming. But to the Roman elite, these ships served a critical purpose. They were an instrument of control and power, a stark and brutal reminder to everyone that the emperor's reach was absolute, and that death was always just a single command away. Perhaps the most famous or infamous death ship in Roman history was the personal vessel of the Emperor Nero. This ship was not just for military campaigns. It was a floating palace of paranoia and political execution. Nero, as we know, was infamous for his cruelty and his extravagant, often violent whims. His personal ship quickly became a chilling symbol of his reign of terror. Nero allegedly used this ship to carry out some of the most brutal acts in Roman history. It's said he would invite his enemies and rivals onto the vessel for lavish parties, only for it to become their tomb. One story tells of a ship designed to collapse and sink, a supposedly accidental tragedy to disguise a political murder. To me, Nero's ship wasn't just a ship, was a physical manifestation of his unchecked, absolute power, a tool for his darkest impulses. Beyond personal vendettas, death ships were an integral part of the Roman Navy's strategy, especially during major wars. These ships were at the forefront of naval battles, not just to fight, but to break the enemy's spirit. They were often equipped with devastating weapons, like massive catapults that could hurl boulders, ballistae that fired giant bolts capable of piercing hulls, and even fireships vessels set ablaze and sent drifting into enemy formations to cause chaos and destruction. The psychological impact of these tactics was immense. For an enemy fleet, The sight of a Roman death ship leading the charge was often enough to cause panic and disarray. Sailors would be demoralized, and commanders might second-guess their plans. In this way, the death ships were more than just tools of war. They were sophisticated weapons of psychological warfare, designed to win the battle before it even began. The very existence of death ships was also deeply symbolic. It represented the Roman Empire's belief that it had the power to control life and death, not just on land, but across the vast expanse of the sea. For the Romans, these vessels were a constant, visible reminder of their own power and their divinely ordained dominance over the known world. They were masters of both the earth and the water. The idea that death could be delivered from the sea, silently and without a trace, added a whole new layer of fear to the already overwhelming power of the Roman military. When I think about it, these ships weren't just instruments of violence. They were a dark reflection of the Empire's core ideology, an unshakable belief in its absolute control over the fate of every person, whether citizen, subject, or enemy. As the Roman Empire began its long, slow decline, so too did the use of its death ships. The wane of Roman naval power and the constant internal struggles meant that maintaining such specialized and fearsome vessels became a low priority. They eventually faded into the past, becoming relics of a bygone era of total dominance. But their legacy lives on. These ships are remembered not just for their formidable power, but for the dark symbol they represented, the ultimate expression of an empire's obsession with control. So, what do you think about the Roman death ships? Were they simply pragmatic tools of war, a necessary evil for a sprawling empire? Or did they represent something deeper and more disturbing about Roman society's fascination with power and death? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey into the past, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Past Chronicles for more fascinating ancient mysteries revealed. Thanks for watching.